Hello and welcome to Mindscapes, a series of conversations with the men and women whose visions, ideas and philosophies define and shape contemporary India. My guest today is a professor at the Indian Institute of Technology, but his passion and commitment has been the promotion of India's art, cultural, music and heritage in general, primarily amongst young people. I'm delighted to welcome Kiran Seth.
Thank you.
Kiran, you're the sort of the guiding spirit, the founder, the inspiration, and then a whole range of other such leadership positions with a movement called SPIC MACAY. You now have more than 150 chapters in different parts of India, more than about 20 in different parts of the world. What are some of these objectives of SPIC MACAY?
Well, the objective of SPIC MACAY, if I may put it in a nutshell, is not so much to promote even art and heritage that way, but to take the essence of the heritage and try and bring it into the lives of young people. Some things which they are missing in the educational system, in the social system. Things like there's very little of abstraction left in our education, very little of subtlety, very little of inspiration, and of course a respect for the mystical, which I think forms the basis of all this. So these elements we are trying to bring into the lives of young people through this broad thing called our heritage. And in our heritage, I think our ancestors have done some very beautiful research work in trying to get these elements into, say, like classical dance, into our folk forms and into our literature. So all these elements we're trying to bring into yoga.
What is the real the value of this for young people, other than sort of a harking back to our past, to our traditions? What is the value? I mean, does it make them happier beings, more efficient beings, more compassionate?
All that
what
and
is
more.
The end?
All that and more. You see, I think that of course it'll make you more compassionate, definitely. But many people, many parents ask us, look, my student, my child has to get into IIT or has to get into one of the top institutions, and if he or she spends time on such activities, how will they manage to do it? So I say that, look, if the child can do that very same thing which another child does in 1/4 of the time or in 1/10 of the time, then all the remaining part of the time can be used for other things. What I feel is that most of us are sending our children into the battle with blunt swords. We're not telling them, wait, sharpen your sword slowly, carefully, and then go calmly, coolly into battle, tick, 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 and come back.
With the sword of wisdom.
Yeah.
But let's go back, and maybe I sort of moved too fast because I've been a great admirer of SPIC MACAY and your work, and I have assumed that our audiences know. What are some of the elements of what SPIC MACAY does? And then we go back to the idea of what it really achieves.
You mean say in a very
well, at the mundane level, you do lecture
Okay.
demonstrations, you
Yeah.
do baithaks. What are some of the elements that you do?
What we try and do is we do, as you said, lecture demonstrations. But I think lecture demonstrations is the poorest thing what SPIC MACAY does, because anything that's abstract, if it's brought into a lecture format, it necessarily destroys that abstraction. But we do lecture demonstrations. We have concerts. We have baithaks. We have workshops. The whole idea in all our presentations is to bring the young person as close to the master as possible.
And who are the kind of masters that you get for these initiatives?
Well, the top people, the top performing artists of our country, I won't call them performing artists, I'll call them
inspirations,
top,
artistic, creative inspirations.
That's it. Like Bismillah Khan Saab and people like that who can really inspire the young person.
Who are some of the other people that you
Yes, I'm very scared to mention names.
For who might be excluded.
No, because you know how it is, because we have the top people including Pandit Ravi Shankar and everybody is giving inputs. All the top artists of our country are helping us in this.
Right.
And it'd be unfair for me to give few names and exclude the others. That's what I think. So, but there's been a big contribution from all our artistic community, not just our performing artists, but people like Anjali Menon, who has been helping us a lot.
What has, say, someone like her been doing, and in what ways does she interact with young people?
She did something very beautiful. This time, of course, she's done workshops of art, but this time at our convention in Hyderabad, she did a lecture demonstration in some sense. Then she was painting, and she was also answering questions, and she was, the painting was visible to the people, the young people who had come from all over the country. And it was a very, very, it was a very inspiring session, I must say. What gets her to paint, and what she tries to bring out through her painting. It was a lovely session, and I think all the young people felt the same way.
And in what ways did they react? I mean, you normally expect that, you know, your programs are going into both the municipal schools, and we will talk about that, but they're also going to the elite institutions where sort of the urbanized, MTVized young people, that's where they study and that's where they go. And in what ways do they interact with this sort of much slower, longer attention span, a completely different inspiration, ethos and culture? So how do the two sort of end up interacting, and what happens?
See, first it's a curiosity. I think everything, any great thing has to happen through a direct experience. Anubhav jise kehte hain. Unless that anubhav is there, nothing, then it remains on an intellectual plane, and that doesn't go very far. So here, somewhere along the line, I've noticed the type of people whom you are saying. They come out of curiosity, but they're caught by the anubhav. There's a direct experience of, say, somebody like Bismillah Khan Sahab, who's now, you know, in his 80s, or Gangubai Hangal, who is in her, you know, mid 80s, and she, just the fact that she can sit there and for 2.5 hours throw her voice the way she does, with her spine absolutely straight, and then she talks very simply. There's no put on. It's a direct sort of a thing, and what she says touches the person's heart, touches something inside, touches a chord. We all have something in us. Only thing is, it's to be touched. And I think these people have the capacity to do that. So whether it be MTV person or a non-MTV person, I think it cuts across caste, color, creed, barrier. All the barriers are cut across by such people. That's the power. You know, like
what do you think, if you were to try and break this up and analyze, what is the aspect of this power, this appeal, that people who have reached the sort of pristine levels of creativity and of articulation of the rasa, of the mood, of the essence of life and living and philosophy, what is it that actually reaches out and touches someone?
I think it's very mystical. It's some sort of underlying truth, which some people are fortunate to touch. And I think that these people who are fortunate to touch it are so sort of, you know, it's so, they don't have to put on. They just have to say, look, well, I know it. It just shows on the face. You don't even have to say that I know it. So a young person coming there, you just sort of, in the mind, lead the young person to that, what I'd call the underlying sea of truth, or whatever you might call it, and give them a sort of glimpse or a touch of that. And then, you know, once a horse is made thirsty, then the horse will find the drinking hole, I think. It's just a matter of getting the young person thirsty. And I think that's what these great people are able to do. In
what ways do you think that this is sort of, and why, you know, use the vehicle of the arts, basically? You know, surely this is more the preserve of the spiritual master than it is of the artist.
No, I think in our arts, it's all intertwined, very, very heavily intertwined. There are many roads, like, you know, not that we are not using masters. We have requested His Holiness to come and talk to young people, and he has very kindly consented. So it's not that only one road is being used. There are many roads to reach the summit of Everest, and whatever roads that we know of, we are trying to present to the young person, because for somebody it might be the musical road, for somebody it might be the theatrical road, for somebody it might be a road of yoga. We also do camps, we conduct workshops in yoga. So somebody it could be through films. I think that's
so
all.
What is this? What is the summit of Everest that you want them to get to?
That's very difficult to describe.
Describe in earthly terms and not sort of the metaphysical, even though sort of it's up there at 29,000 feet.
No, it makes you, I think, aware of another dimension which we don't experience in our day-to-day lives, I think. And it comes at random instance. It's not something which is very planned. So how I can describe this? I know that when an artist says, "Ye kabhi kabhi lag jata hai, kabhi kabhi lag jata hai," what does that mean? He's a great artist or she's a great artist. But even then, they say that only once in a while are they able to set up that connection, whatever the connection may be, which gives them the reason for going on, doing what they're doing. So that connection is what takes them to Everest, the tip of Everest or whatever, and once one of them experiences it, then he or she can tell a young person, "Look, you also come, I'll show you something maybe that you would like, other than just ice cream or lollipop."
If we were to try and sort of define this in numbers, what kind of numbers of young people are you reaching, say during a year?
See, we do approximately 1,000 programs in about 150 centers in a year, and I don't know, it can vary. In schools the numbers are larger, in colleges they are smaller, but I think we will be reaching a couple of lakhs, I suppose, of young people every year at different levels. But there's another level at which we reach young people, that is just by the poster itself, just the fact that a program is going on, even if a young person does not attend it, at least he or she knows that, oh well, there is a great person around who came to our college. At least that, the name at least comes in. That's the first level. Sure. Then you go from level to level. Some people graduate, I call it concentric circles. You have to have a lot of concentric circles, and then the diffusion process takes place to the center. But always the core is going to be small, of the people who really understand it in its depth and its, that sort of a thing. And
you describe your the SPIC MACAY as a movement rather than an organization.
Sure.
So what is the difference between a movement and an organization in that sense?
Well, in a movement, I think what happens is you first get the people, and then the whole thing follows. The money, the organization, etc., follows. In an organization, first you get a big building, you get a couple of computers, and then people follow. And then you tell people what to do. Here you cut the coat according to the size of the person. One very important aspect of SPIC MACAY is to bring in this concept of what we call Nishkam Karma, selfless service, where we could have also gotten, a big building, I presume, with Kamaini sitting on a leather chair and saying, now you can, dictating whatever she has to dictate. But we chose that it should be encouraging one very important aspect of our heritage, that is this concept of Nishkam Karma. So in this voluntary movement, people are giving their time. We take time from you also, right? And we get people to contribute their time. And they, in turn, are, I think, elevated by it. I think the quality of work that comes in through this Nishkam Karma idea is something of a different nature altogether. I just don't know how to describe it because it has given me, people say you've done so much in SPIC MACAY. I say you don't know what I've got out of it. You don't know what I have how much I have benefited.
Well, what have you got out of it? What you feel that?
I feel something inside which I cannot describe. I feel that I have become a much more perceptive person, and maybe more sensitive, and many other beautiful things have happened within me which I don't like to bring out, but I just say that I think that it has a very, very beautiful effect. Giving of yourself is a very, very beautiful thing, and that's been one part of our heritage also, which is something which people are forgetting.
You mentioned Kamaini, and I know who Kamaini is.
Yes.
Well, who is Kamaini?
Oh, I'm sorry.
And what kind of nucleus do you have to catalyze the things that happen with SPIC MACAY?
We have to get people like more like people like Kamaini on the face of this earth, so that it'll be a much better place to stay.
Well, you'll have to tell us who she is, what she does, and what makes her so special.
No, she was with us for many years, and she gave of herself. As I said, I've seldom come across people who give of themselves so selflessly as she has, and with such, not just with the full idea of what she's doing, and without expecting anything. I have learned a lot from that lady, I must say.
And she came into SPIC MACAY as a student, volunteer, as a part of the movement.
She was in Indraprasth College, and in her first year she joined us, and she has given to it in a very, very fundamental way, let me put it that way. Many other things can be said, but in a very fundamental way.
Have you thought of sort of, trying to articulate, define, conceptualize, express this so it's a model that can be replicated? Or does it just come as a consequence of who you are and what your aspiration is?
No, I don't think it's just me. I think it's a group of people who have collectively are working in a particular way which has evolved over time, and which comes out of conviction. How can I, if I'm convinced about something, or let me just say, what is it, if I ask you, what is it like to fall in love? How would I describe it? I think it's something similar. If I'm in love with something, then it comes out in a very powerful way, and it comes out in it's not so easy to describe it, I think.
But love has many nuances, love with attachment, love with possession.
No, I'm not talking of a different type of love. Let's talk about love in the first phase, when the attachment part has not yet come in, No, what I'm trying to point out is, I don't think I've been able to put it into a square box or into
a definable structure that we could then hold up and say, well, this works, let's try and replicate it.
But I'm sure it can be put down as some guiding principles for voluntary organizations. I'm sure we could put down something which would be guidelines for operating voluntary organizations, because they're much different.
Well, that's a thought for you. And how do you manage to sort of organize and orchestrate the funding for this? I mean, this costs money, ultimately, even though it's a very integral part of your processes and project, that in almost entirely that the artists are not paid. You just take care of their expenses to come and perform, and so they're not out of pocket.
No, we pay every artist. We give a small amount, but we give every artist, because we believe, though many artists have said they don't, they don't even ask us how much. Artist support has been phenomenal. They don't ask us what we are going to give them, but we make it a point to give a small dakshina, so that if we want the art to survive, if we want this whole realm to survive, the artists also must survive. If they're doing it year after year, artists who are going for so many programs, it's, after all, they're professionals, they're making their living from that also. So I think that is an essential part of our thing. We have to give a small amount to every artist.
As a dakshina. They're not commercially driven, but, how do you mobilize, organize funding for this?
Yeah, but if you look at the amounts involved are very large, because the multiplication factor is 1,000, and then you have to also, there's so many other expenses incurred. Well, we are like bhikshus, we go with a little kamandalu and go to, including to you, we have gone.
Well,
so it has been a tough battle, I must admit. But there are people yet who believe in causes, I think, fortunately. And though they are a rarer breed and getting rarer by the day, but yet I think there are people.
So who are the kinds of people? Unless you're coy about mentioning names, lest you leave.
No, I can, here I can mention names because there are people like Amit Judge of Turner Morrison, who has been, who never asked us what he was going to get back in return. There have been people like Johari Lal of ONGC who have not looked at what they were going to get in return.
So these are basically people from the corporate sector.
Corporate sector. Even in the government, there have been people. I know, for example, like in Chief Minister Digvijay Singh ji has been a person who has always been. There's not very much that we can give back in return if you look at it in terms of publicity or whatever.
Brand image or political mileage.
Yeah. So, though in a long-term sense, I think we can give back a lot. But there have been people even in the departments of...
because you have been able to draw these funds from diverse sources, even though you don't give sort of publicity on banners and hoardings and things like that. You don't do that because you want to keep the nature of what you do. To maintain the sanctity and the sacredness of that. You've had this sort of interaction with young people for well, more than a couple of generations, really. Do you see do you see changes? And in what ways are the young people you were working with in the early 80s different to the young people you're working with in the late 90s? That's 20 years.
Yeah. I think that there's a greater awareness now, much greater awareness. And also young people today are much more willing to check things out. But the other side of the coin is that they have become a little impatient. What you require to get into this realm is a little bit of patience and a little bit of faith. Unless these two elements are there, you'll miss out on something very beautiful. It's like when I went to a school, there was a little girl who came up and I asked her, what do you think is the difference between Indian classical music and say pop music or like, film music? And she said something very beautiful. She said that the pop music is like a phuljadi, like a sparkler. It sparkles for 30 seconds, it's very beautiful, and then finishes. But classical music and things of depth, I'll extrapolate, and I'll say that, it's like a dhoop batti, which you put into that corner of the room, and the smell hasn't come to you right now. It hasn't yet come. Then it comes to you slowly. And then what it does is, slowly it fills the whole room, and then it lasts for many hours after one has even gone away from the room. But today what's happening is we are putting the dhoop batti there, but the young person is out of the room before that smell comes. So that's a big problem. One has to figure out a way by which, because everything has become so fast, so there has to be something that says, look, there are certain things which you can only experience if you slow down. You have to have a little bit of faith and you have to slow down. So that's what we keep trying to do.
Do you have the faith that despite the sort of globalization of culture, the globalization of communications, that these values and these processes that you have striven and worked so admirably, successfully and hard to preserve and cultivate, will in fact survive?
I don't know, really. I can't say. Time will tell, because sometimes I feel we are fighting a losing battle, I must admit.
What keeps you going?
Just the fact that I have been touched by something. When you are, it's the experience of something which is very, very, very beautiful, and I can't but say, Rajiv, please, you also have a look at it, or whoever. If I have a friend or if I have a young person with me, I just would like you to shake up the person. Just try it out. Maybe you'll see what we have here. See, because the whole focus of young people in the past, at least 2 decades or 3 decades or whatever, has been to look outward. Look at the rest of the world, and no one's saying one shouldn't. But while the computers were being developed in the West, while all this facility was being developed in the West, what were we doing? Were we twiddling our thumbs, or what were we doing? There were some processes taking place here too. People were experimenting with their own body as a laboratory, and they came up with some fantastic experiments and some fantastic results. Why can't we, in this day and age, gain from those experiments also, just like we can gain by these video cameras, by the computers, by space travel, which have been basically brought to us from the West. So I think that, I hope that the young person will see the truth in this argument. It's not, it can't be replicated so easily in a laboratory, because the laboratory is your own body. So that's where the difficulty lies. But if we can tell the young person to spend a little time, say maybe 5 to 10% of their time, going a little inward, maybe some of them will be touched by that.
Well, Kiran, we will be applauding your efforts all the way.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations and thank you.
Thank you very much.